하나, 둘, 셋. Bonjour. 제 이름은 제이콥이고요. 한국어, 중국어, 프랑스어하고 비밀 언어 공부하고 있어요. 还有，我是 Fluyo 的作曲家. Fluyo is a brand new language learning app unlike any other. It is currently in development. It is currently live on Kickstarter. Fluyo is being led by the brilliant mind of Ikenna, and I am beyond thrilled and honored to be part of this team, working alongside some amazingly talented and creative people from around the world. I thought it would be really fun to make this video, which is a little behind the scenes video of some of the music that I've done for one of the previous teaser videos for the Kickstarter campaign, which came out a few months ago. So whether you are a composer or not, I hope you will find this video entertaining and interesting and fun, and dare I say, perhaps even tantalizing. With that all said, 시작하자. Okay, so this is Cubase 12. I think first things first, I'm just going to play through it and just so we can listen to what it sounds like. And quick aside that the video that you see in the corner here is actually an earlier rough cut video, so some elements of the video might be missing, but the overall timing of the video should remain the same from what you've seen before online. So I'll play through it now. Before I actually dive into some of the layers here, I just want to talk a little bit about the high level kind of philosophy and sort of my overall approach to composing in general, as well as specifically composing for linear media like a video like this teaser video. And I've been part of the Fluyo team for about 2.5 years, and throughout that time I've written a handful of pieces of music so far. Some of it is in the app already, some of it's still kind of in production. One of the things that was really important for me as a composer is that Fluyo has a very identifiable kind of sonic identity. And very early on, I was having discussions with Ikenna and Alcuin, who's the co-founder of Fluyo, as well as some of the other team members along the way. But some of these initial conversations resulted in us coming up with a handful of kind of emotions and sort of adjectives that we would continuously fall back on, as well as other sources of inspiration that we all kind of agreed on. We all felt very aligned with that kind of vision for the music from a very early start, which I feel is a very special thing to happen. So some of the things that came up early on are we wanted to create sort of a light-hearted sense of adventure, sort of a curiosity. We wanted the music to feel very flowing. Some sources of inspiration we talked about are like the Ghibli films, for example, the music from the Ghibli films, you know, that sense of wonder, that sense of adventure, also the lightheartedness that comes with it. You know, it depends on the film, of course, but that sort of magical feeling and having this sort of flowing kind of vibe, this sort of flowing energy throughout things, you know, because like Fluyo, like I flow, like that's literally literally the title of the app. So we wanted sort of the music to reflect that kind of flowing nature of things as well. And so for me personally, I really like to write in a melodic way as often as possible, sort of like a narratively melodic kind of way. And again, Ghibli films music was a big source of inspiration. I also took a lot of inspiration from like Stephen Price's score for Our Planet. That documentary is awesome. If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it. You know, I'm taking inspiration from a lot of other kind of game soundtracks, especially JRPGs or just RPGs in general. So a bunch of different sources of inspiration. And so with all of that in mind, I think that already helps me kind of hone in and focus on kind of the direction that I want to take the music in general. And so when sitting down to start working on a piece like this for a video, you know, for a trailer video, right? Like this is not that long. And so I have to find the balance of saying a lot in a short amount of time. And one of the other things that's also tricky about working on a piece of media like this is finding the balance of the music with the sound effects with the voiceover. So for example, if I just play this really quick, I'm going to unmute the audio so you can hear voiceover and the sound effects kind of baked into the audio. So you can hear kind of how it all works together just really quick.
Imagine if learning a language was as fun as playing a video game. Well, it's about to be. Welcome to the world of Fluyo, an all-in-one language learning app.
So finding that balance from sort of a mixing perspective can be a little bit tricky, just because, you know, if I'm composing a piece like this, or if you're a composer and if you're working on something similar, of course you want your music to shine through, and at the same time you have to find the right balance, because you don't want to detract from any given aspect of things. Like if the music is too overbearing, if the melody is too crazy, if there are too many layers, you know, for example, then it can really get in the way. Sort of sonically, it just clutters the mix, and so that could potentially distract people, and they might not like hear the voiceover correctly, or they might not appreciate the sound design. Shout out to Anthony, the sound designer for Fluyo. He's awesome. So yeah, so it's about finding the right balance just to make sure that like the core information of what the listener needs to kind of comprehend is coming through. And in this case, we had to prioritize the voiceover. So generally what I like to do is I try and find one kind of like seed of an idea to hold on to. So whether that's sort of a layer of instrumentation that I like really feel strongly about, it's like, yeah, this particular drum sound, it's like I need to use this drum sound somewhere. Or maybe it's like, okay, this rhythm of the staccato strings, like I'm really feeling this. Let's see if I can write some melody, you know, some melodic layers on top of it. In this case, I tried to really start with the kind of main melody here. You can see these purple ones are a few different layers, kind of all performing the same main melody. Here we have this flute from this sample library here, Forest Kingdom 2. I really like Eduardo Tagliante's sample libraries, by the way. If I just solo this layer, you can hear kind of that depth, that sense of space, because of the reverb is part of it too. And so that's another thing that I really personally like to try creating, is like having this sense of atmosphere in any given piece that I write. And I feel like that can be achieved through layering of instruments in a satisfying way. And that takes some trial and error and experimentation, as well as the combination of, you know, having reverb be kind of that nice Goldilocks just right sweet spot, so that it's not too crazy, but it's not too sparse, if that makes sense. So that takes a little bit of time and experimentation too. I don't know if I did it perfectly, to be honest. There's a lot of aspects of the mix on this track that, you know, in retrospect, I would really want to change. But I think that's how it always is. You know, you finish a piece of music or any kind of art or just anything that you create. I think it's very common to look back even like a day later and be like, oh, change all these things. Anyway, that tangent aside, we have this main melody being played by the flute. I've also layered it with a kind of separate flute sound, this sort of, it's kind of like a synthetic flute sound. And then layered on top of that, we have a solo violin sample library. And in this case, I'm using the performance samples, Solos of the Sea. I generally like to use live instruments whenever possible. So for the final Fluyo soundtrack, I'm definitely going to have a lot of layers of live instrumentation, because I just feel like it brings things to life. And so when you combine it all together, I think it just really glues things together in a nice way. And you have, you know, the main flute and the violin are very, they cut through pretty well. And then you have this kind of secondary flute layer, that sort of synthetic sound in the middle. It kind of just like glues things together in this sort of kind of subtle way. And so this melody that I'm using here is actually a slight variation on kind of the main motif for Fluyo. So you'll hear some variation of this like kind of motif show up in a few different parts throughout the experience. But you can hear, you know, I have this kind of a simplified version, and then it kind of more fleshed out version here. Versus and this serves two purposes actually. So this first introduction of this melodic layer was actually a bit more complicated. I think it had more notes along these lines, but I got some feedback that it felt like it was cluttering the mix a little too much and kind of distracting from the voiceover. So I ended up simplifying it a little bit here for this first introduction of it. But what it also serves kind of as a nice byproduct of changing things in this way is it sort of evolves the melody in a fun way. I think that having it start a little bit simple and then add a few more notes later on, and then you hear kind of the same thing towards the end, kind of offers sort of a nice little narrative arc for this melody throughout, you know, the minute or so that we have in the trailer here. Early on in these initial conversations I was having with Ikenna and the rest of the team, it was really important that we kind of figured out like what is the tone and what is the mood and the kind of the energy of any given section supposed to be. And so we decided that for this first section here, this sort of intro, you know, visually it's pretty sparse. You have, okay, there's dolphins coming on the screen, what's going on? So we figured like kind of emotionally, energy level wise, it should be pretty calm, but like curious. And then we have whoosh, this like awesome reveal, this beautiful art. We're revealing the title, Fluyo, it's here. And so I wanted this really lush kind of adventurous sound to kind of come through. Yeah, this whole middle section, we go through and it's like the main melody playing through. And then we have a tonal shift here. And so we kind of fade to black and it's like, okay, language learning is a journey, but we fade to black, what's going on? And that's when a lot of these instruments kind of fade out and we keep it pretty sparse again. And then things are like, it's kind of dark, kind of curious. Da, 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 you know, what's this monster's, this creature's attacking us. And so we have this kind of darker, suspenseful mood for a second without being too heavy or too dark, because overall, like, Fluyo is supposed to be a very kind of fun, lighthearted experience. And so I didn't want the music to ever feel too dramatic, too serious. So it's about kind of finding the balance of like, what is sort of the range of the highs and the lows kind of emotionally and dynamically. And fairly quickly after this kind of suspenseful section, you know, we fade back into a very kind of sparse but sort of lighthearted atmosphere. It's still kind of curious, lighthearted, like I was saying, but also there are a few more layers involved. And so it's sort of this kind of evolution of the intro. And I wanted to kind of create this sort of sandwich effect where you start and end with something that's like a little bit easygoing, lighthearted, curious, sparkling, hinting at that kind of magical adventure. But in the outro, you know, we've gone through this whole journey of this middle section. And so we've seen the evolution of the melody. We have all these other layers kind of going on to support the main melody. And so that outro should reflect that change and that growth. And that's why we have some more layers here. A lot of the instrumentation I'm using here. So we have like this hand pan, which I love the sound of this. We have this udu drum. And some of the other instruments that I'm using as well, like this main flute that I showed you already, is definitely a staple instrument as part of the soundscape in Fluyo. Same thing with the oboe and the clarinet that shows up a few times in other parts of the soundtrack. And so I wanted to use some of the instrumentation that's going to be in the rest of the soundtrack because I want to like set the tone for what the soundscape of Fluyo is going to be. And not everything is going to be making use of this particular kind of palette of instruments. But I think in general, one of the things that I try and focus on when approaching a new project is like I was saying earlier, is like, what does this sound like? What is the scope of this world going to sound like? When I sat down to write this, I knew that, okay, I wanted to use the flute as part of the main melody. I wanted to layer it maybe with the violin, having some strings kind of back it up just to give it that sort of adventurous feel, that sort of like maybe RPG inspired feeling, and then using some of these other instruments, you know, the hand pan, for example, that is kind of another staple instrument as part of the rest of the Fluyo soundtrack. And I already kind of mentioned this earlier, but we have this outro here that has kind of the main melody, main motif kind of play through once more, again with a slight variation on it from what you heard before. So it's again this sort of evolution of the main melody, but I really wanted to have this be kind of this final punctuation as part of the teaser. And so I wanted to have this final moment, the end of the trailer, you hear this motif one more time, it's this final punctuation like I've been saying, and it's like Fluyo. As for this middle section here, I won't go into all these different layers, but the main melody is like the shining primary voice that needs to shine through in the music. And basically everything else should support that. So whether it's sort of the kind of secondary kind of melodic phrases with the oboe or the clarinet, or we have, a lot of movement with like the staccato strings, for example. Or these other individual string layers. Everything is really creating this sense of kind of lush space, and everything is really trying to support the sense of movement and adventure, and again, that flowing nature that I was trying to achieve, and support the main melody as well. So there you have it. There is a little walkthrough of the teaser video that I made a couple months ago. Of course, please go subscribe to Ikenna's channel for all the major updates about Fluyo. Go check out the Kickstarter. Please check it out. Please support us if you're able. Tell your friends, tell your parents, tell the person at the boba shop down the street, and let's spread word about Fluyo, because this is truly an app like no other. Thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot, and I hope you found this entertaining and fun and tantalizing. And let me know if you want to see more videos like this. じゃあ、皆さん、見てくれてありがとう。Look at that dolphin, it's so cute.